Hi guys, it's Teresa Wasser with RX Physiotherapy, and today I want to spend a few minutes just talking about a few myths that are out there in the fitness world and rehabilitation world in regards to training older adults. So the first myth that I want to talk about is the idea that when we're training older adults, we want to kind of keep things low and slow. Historically, when we think about fitness for older adults, you can think about the Sit and Be Fit programs where we're kind of seated and doing, kind of little dumbbell exercises. Maybe you're thinking about seniors aquasize, or if you're going to the doctor, oftentimes you get the recommendation as an older adult to, just start a walking program. And these are all good things, not to take anything away from them. But I think that historically a lot of the fitness advice that's given to older adults is really missed the mark in terms of what we can do with our older adults. There's kind of this idea that when you're older, you shouldn't lift heavy weights, you should take it easy. Even among fitness and rehab professionals, there's often a fear and a hesitancy to load our older adults. I think we're worried that we're going to, hurt them in some way. But we really need to stop underestimating our older adults. And stop allowing our beliefs to hold them back from what they're capable of. We need to change the conversation from this idea of, they shouldn't be lifting heavy, they could have osteoporosis, more to a conversation of, they should be lifting heavy because they have osteoporosis. And if you're not on the same page as me, I would really recommend that you take a look at the Lift More trial results that were published just in 2007. That's Watson et al. And basically what they were able to show was that high intensity progressive resistance and impact training in postmenopausal women that had low to very low bone mass, so these were osteoporotic patients, the ones that we would typically shy away from doing this type of training with, they showed that in these subjects, not only was this type of training safe, but very effective in improving their bone mineral density and function. We really need to pay attention to this evidence, which I think is massively important in terms of how we can train our older adults. Now that takes us to myth 2. So myth 2 is this idea that we should never lift in a flexed posture. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. We want to try to avoid spinal flexion when we're lifting, and I agree with that to some extent. But what about if we're an older adult and we have a thoracic kyphosis, so our upper back is rounded? What happens if we then need to lift a laundry basket or bring in some bags of groceries? Should we not lift then? The other thing that we need to think about too is that some of the research is showing actually a reduction in thoracic kyphosis with weight training. So even the Lift More trial did show some reduction in kyphosis in their subjects and improved stature rate. So if we're thinking that, because a patient has a thoracic kyphosis that they shouldn't be deadlifting, I think we're actually doing them a disservice with that. We want to be training, to improve their strength. We want to be stimulating those spinal erectors, strengthening them in a functional lift, teaching them, some good biomechanics in terms of some spine sparing strategies. But if we just say, you have, you've got a marked thoracic kyphosis, better not deadlift with you, I'm not so sure that that is the best thing. And so for me, the idea that we should never lift in a flexed posture is a little bit of a myth. Now moving on to myth 3, that myth is the idea that we must squat to full depth. So with CrossFit and powerlifting, kind of the standard that we use is that for your squat, you want the hip crease to fall below the top of your knee, so breaking parallel basically. Now, especially with our older adults, sometimes we have some mobility issues. Sometimes it's a strength and coordination that goes into that as well, where they are not able to achieve that standard. And so I've heard, sometimes this talk that, oh, well, if you can't do, a full air squat to full depth, then you shouldn't load that patient. And I need to say that I disagree with that. We do load these patients, and my philosophy is that we load them within what their mobility allows, and within what their ability to control will permit. So they squat as deep as they can, and we do load them within that range. And we also find that these patients typically improve in their squat depth over time. But if we didn't load these people before they were able to get a full depth squat, then again, I think we would be doing them a disservice. Moving on to myth number 3. Myth 3 is that the goal of fitness in older adults is to maintain function. I know you might be thinking, well, how is that a myth? That sounds pretty good. But let me put it to you this way. If someone came to me and they said, hey, Teresa, I want you to work out and, you're going to train hard, and probably if you do that, you may be able to stay where you're at for a while. Now, for me, I don't know how enticing that's going to be. And I don't think that, how is that any different for an older adult? How enticing is it for them as well? And really, we can do so much more than maintain them in many cases. And I mean, yes, over the long term, we are looking at maintenance, but certainly in a shorter term, we are improving things. And in some cases, we can improve them drastically. A lot of patients, as they're getting older, they'll kind of give up on things and say, well, I guess that's just something that I'm not going to be able to do anymore. And with training, we're getting them stronger, we're improving their mobility, we're improving their function, and they are taking back things that they can now do that they thought were no longer something they would be able to do. And that's something worth training for. And I really think that that's more what our goal should be in training older adults. Yeah, we want to maintain their function, but we want to do more than that. We want to improve it, and we sure can. All right, thanks very much for listening, guys. Have a great day.